And how you doing, everybody? Hello. Technical difficulties to start things off. My goodness, Jim, we haven't used this software in a little bit. My goodness. How are we doing, everybody? Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Barreled Up Podcast. Jim, how are we doing, my friend?
I'm excited about this the close to this season. So I'm doing pretty darn good. Even though my team went out a while ago, the good news is I focus on the whole league.
Yeah.
So and there's a lot of great exciting things happening. So I'm feeling pretty good these days. You?
Well, I was just gonna say. I mean, we just had some big news coming earlier. Lots of implications for the postseason, and
Mhm.
I mean, my Red Sox won over the Blue Jays tonight. I'm sorry to tell you that. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah.
Tanner Houck pitching a decent one tonight.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
gotta get myself happy over something over here. My goodness, but
Well, you haven't been eliminated yet. Congratulations for that. You
are
have
they
not
still
been
in?
eliminated.
I crossed them off
Nope,
like 2 weeks
nope.
ago.
You are with this win, you're 3.5 back of
Yeah.
the Kansas City
Ah.
Royals, who have lost 7 games in a row.
Oh
So,
man,
there you go.
yeah. It's a quiet night in Major League Baseball. Everyone is getting ramped up for this week.
Well, it's not quite in Houston. It's not quite in Houston.
That is true.
You've got a humdinger of a series with those two. I don't think it's gonna have any implication on the West, but it's that wild card because
Oh yeah.
Seattle is if they win this, if they hold on, they'll be a game and a half
Yep.
behind Kansas City.
Yep.
So the Seattle Mariners, they'll be 4 back of Houston. Houston would basically need to lose every game the rest of the way, and Seattle will have to win out to for a scenario to play out where Seattle would take the West. But Seattle is getting the job done tonight. They're looking good. They've got a
Mhm.
4-0 lead now. I didn't like that matchup. I actually don't like. It's funny. I did not really like the matchup tonight. I felt like Hunter Brown over Miller was a better matchup, and then I don't like tomorrow either. I don't like Framber Valdez does not have good head-to-head numbers against the Mariner bats. So we
Yeah.
could be looking at a series that starts out with the Mariners grabbing the first 2 games.
Yeah, I was just talking about this last night. We'll dive more into the American League wildcard race in a little bit, but I said the same thing. I was like,
Yeah.
I've liked Bryce Miller this year, but Hunter Brown I've liked even more.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I was saying last night on my predictions for the final week that Mariners, because they're that wild card race could get very interesting when it comes to tiebreakers. It's that close, and the Mariners. I'll talk more about it in a little bit, but their best bet is to win out. I mean, I know that's easier said than done, and if they can pull off a sweep of the Astros, oh my! And hey, they're winning the one that we both thought that was going to be the toughest one, and I think they're on the right track. But let's start diving into it here. Before we do get started, everyone, if you can go follow the Barreled Up Podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you are listening to us for the first time, go check us out over on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Google, wherever you find your podcast. Go give us a 5-star rating. If you like our faces, we would appreciate that. We're just talking ball here. And we got the off season, which, hey, that's coming up pretty soon. Everyone knows we love off season talk, but we got all of the postseason we're going to be talking about. It's going to be a fun few months starting in about a week now. So
Yeah, I think it starts now. I really
basically,
like the we were talking before we started the show. You had a good live stream last night. I had a good live stream last night and this morning. I feel like the interest is picking up where baseball is interesting because unlike football, I feel like the fan bases are really, really siloed out and you really just pay attention to your team and maybe you spread a little bit out to the division rivals and that's about it. But if you're a fan of a National League Central team, that may be all you pay attention to until now. Now is when you will start paying attention to what's happening around the rest of the league with the playoffs and the seeding and okay, looks like we could match up against the New York Mets. I need to, my radar is turned on for the Mets. So this is a great time because as the playoff races heat up, as we get in the postseason and then the off season, that's when for you and I it clicks a little bit smoother with the fan base because now people are leaving their silos and they are interested in more people are interested in what's happening around the whole league. I love this. This is when it begins and it's going to carry through really until January. So it's time to eat.
Yeah. No, you kind of nailed it right there on the head. When you compare it to football, football is, I think one of the reasons it's so popular, I think it's because it's very digestible when it's happening, right? You got your once a week game, it's kind of spread out into Thursday night football, Monday night football. It's a little more easy to digest, where baseball, it can be a bit of a slog at times. Yes, we love it, but when it comes to a lot of fans out there, a lot of them just want to check the box scores, see what's going on. That's why we have so much interest in, views and whatnot during trade deadline and off-season time, because everyone can be involved and you're not having to pay constant attention to the box scores and the standings. You can kind of just see, okay, how's my team getting better? That's why, we've always enjoyed the offseason and the trade deadline so much, because everyone can get involved with it. But then when you kind of get to this time, you have a lot of people have checked out, their teams are out, right? But this is a fun time of the year where, you're deciding those wild card races, division races, not as many this year, but the few that we have to pay attention to, or the couple we have to pay attention to, it's they're good ones, right? So let's dive into one of those, right? Let's go ahead and get kicked off. Since we talked about the Mariners, why don't we just start there? Why don't we just talk about the American League wild card to start things off? This has been a pretty wackadoodle wild card race. When you take a look at just how many teams are involved here right now, the Detroit Tigers, have just completely turned everything around since the trade deadline. You'd think they traded away Jack Flaherty and Mark Canha as well. They were done. You're thinking, all right, they're 8.5 out or whatever it was at the time. You weren't expecting the Tigers to be in this spot at this point. If you go back a month, and they've just been playing great. The offense has been just so much better. Their starting pitching has been solid, even though they've had a lot of guys contributing. The bullpen guys are stepping up. The lineup is just much more complete without Javier Baez. That's probably one of the greatest addition by subtraction moves of all time, him going to the IL. The Tigers just came out of nowhere, and here they are for the second wild card. Overall, what are your thoughts, before we dive into these other teams real quick? What are your thoughts here on the Tigers, especially calling up Jackson Jobe today, top pitching prospect in baseball? Kind of looking back in hindsight, what were you thinking about the Tigers, about a month ago? Were you done? Or, where were you?
Right. I thought the trade was smart at the time because Jack Flaherty was one of the top pitchers that were available. I was underwhelmed with the return, but I think Tigers fans have been very happy with Trey Sweeney. That was the key piece that came back. And Trey Sweeney has come up with some big clutch hits. He has been a solid contributor, better than a solid contributor. You could argue that without Trey Sweeney, because yes, you miss Jack Flaherty, you'd love to have that arm in that rotation, but you could also argue that without Trey Sweeney, some of the hits, some of the games he's had, that Detroit would subtract 1 or 2 wins and still be on the outside looking in today. So I do think that there's, it's easy to sort of say they miss Flaherty, but they would also miss Sweeney. I think the Tigers, it sort of came together. I was looking back at my power rankings, and
me too.
I had the Tigers just outside the top 10 to start the year, and they sort of hung around there for the first month or so. So the expectations were there, the talent was there. They just didn't click. They weren't playing good baseball. They were dealing with some poor performance on the field. They had to send Torkelson down. Javi Baez was awful with the bat, and they made some changes. And you've got guys that just playing good baseball. Winning 1-run games. Tarek Skubal's amazing. Their schedule, I'm sure you've looked at it too. Their schedule lines up to where they should be in. They are a game up on the Twins. They're tied with Kansas City. Both Detroit and Kansas City could get in because they're a game up on the Twins. I look at this schedule for the Tigers the rest of the way. This is 6 games left. They should go 4-2. At the very least, they should go 4-2. When I look at the Twins schedule, I think best case scenario for the Twins is they go 3-3. And that's not enough. So if the Tigers do go 4-2, the Twins got to go 5-1. It feels like the Tigers fought their way back. They earned it. They belong. And if they can get their seeding right, because at the moment Kansas City holds the tiebreaker, but man, if they can get ahead of Kansas City and get that 5 seed, you know who they play in the first round? The Orioles. The Orioles, a team that the Detroit Tigers just took 4 out of 6 from.
Yep.
And you'd feel great if you're the Tigers going into a series against the Baltimore Orioles. Great. It's a great story.
Yeah.
The charge, the comeback for them to actually take it to the finish line, which I think they will do. It's a great story.
Yeah. Kind of getting back to, Trey Sweeney. I've been a fan of Trey Sweeney since he got drafted. I remember just liking that draft pick, guy that got on base a lot, just a good at bat from him. He just didn't have a good home, where he wasn't really getting a lot of chances. He's been given a spot here to really flourish. I think he's been a key contributor, along with calling up guys like Jace Young, getting Torkelson back on track. I was taking a look at some of the numbers. It's funny when you look at the deeper analytics, there's not a whole lot of differences when you look at prior to the deadline and after the deadline. It's just little tweaks that they've made. And I think, again, getting Javier Baez out of that lineup, I think, was just killing their lineup, especially at the bottom of the order. They've made small little tweaks, when it comes to the batted ball profile. It's those little things that I think have gone a long way, but their pitching all year has been very solid. And even without Jack Flaherty, they've just had a lot of these guys stepping up for them. They've had, multiple guys making spot starts, guys, like Herter basically is, like a starter coming out of the bullpen, right? He's been getting so many long relief outings, right? Like you said, everything is coming together here for the Tigers. And I think if they end up going up against the Orioles, do you know how much we were spamming Tarek Skubal to the Orioles at the deadline?
Yes.
And could you imagine if Tarek Skubal just goes and throws
the Orioles season
game 1? I remember talking about that on my stream. I remember saying, could you imagine the Orioles, they end up getting knocked out in the first round because they didn't have enough starting pitching? Could you imagine the guy that takes them out being Tarek Skubal? I mean, that it's poetry. I mean, that
would be great.
But you are right about that. You are right.
I think that would be amazing, and that would be another great storyline. And I would give the Tigers the edge over the Orioles in that series, which would set up a fantastic Detroit and New York series in the next round. And you could see Skubal. I made my live stream earlier today. I talked about Skubal going head to head against Cole. That wouldn't happen because the Tigers would have to pitch Skubal in the first round, and Cole would go in game 1. So I don't know if it would maybe line up for Skubal to go game 1 against the Yankees, but it would be great. Let me throw this out to you.
Yeah.
And this is maybe, jumping ahead a couple of months, but the Detroit Tigers are going to have a very interesting decision to make this offseason, because their second baseman is Colt Keith. Their third baseman is Jace Young. Their shortstop is Trey Sweeney. What the heck do they do with Javi Baez with an infield that now there's no need for him? Can you? What do you do? What can you find? Can you convince Artie Moreno and the Angels to trade for him? I don't know what you do with Javi Baez. You can't put him out there in front of Trey Sweeney next year. You can't do it. Trey Sweeney's got to be a starting shortstop, in my opinion. And Young's at third base, and Keith is at second base. There's no room. There's nowhere for Javi Baez. That's there.
Yeah.
There are some conundrums that have to be worked out this offseason. That's going to be one of them.
Yeah. Unless like one of these guys can move, to another spot, but like, where do you move them? You move a guy to the corner outfield? Like, I don't know.
No, Meadows is in center. He's a center fielder of the future. Green's in left. Veerling's in right. Veerling's had a good year. You can't.
Yeah.
There's no room for Javi Baez's pool noodle of a bat. There's just no room for it.
Could be interesting.
I don't know what
Could
they
be
do.
Very interesting. I think the Tigers, I had someone comment on a video that I did not too long ago where I was talking about teams with crucial off seasons coming up, and I mentioned the Tigers. This was, I think they were like 4 games back, 5 games back. I wasn't completely sold that they were gonna make a comeback fully, but I still thought, oh yeah, even if they make the postseason, it's still a crucial offseason because you're going into this, competitive window. What do you do with these guys? Could you even maybe entertain something, with someone like Torkelson possibly, right? So if you ended up having to keep Baez, and you can't move that contract, could someone like Torkelson be used, to make room, and then one of those guys can move to first, something like that. I think it's a really interesting offseason. I think it's also a time where they need to really add something for the rotation to go with Tarek Skubal. Jackson Job's not going to be a frontline guy, right off the bat. I mean, even if he's really good, you're still probably going to have some innings limit with him. I think they need to add something to that rotation. There's a lot to think about with the Tigers in the offseason, no matter what happens here this postseason. Definitely a team to keep an eye on. But we've got a couple other teams really battling it out here. The Royals have completely gone into Slumpville. The Twins have basically just fallen off a cliff at this point. And we got the Mariners, who are winning tonight, who we talked about earlier, just barely hanging on here. Listen, I said this last night. I want to see how you feel about this. Yeah, I think the Mariners are that team this year. Don't let the Mariners get into the postseason. That is a scary team to get in the postseason right now because their offense has completely, just like the Tigers, they have found a way to get this done. They've been clicking ever since they made that switch to Dan Wilson and then bringing in Edgar Martinez as the hitting coach. Their offense is one of the top in baseball since that move. They already got the pitching. I need to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think the Mariners are the team that you don't want to go up against in the postseason?
I think the team you don't want to go up against is in the National League, and it's not the Dodgers.
Or at least in the American League.
In the American League, I don't want to face the Astros. Yeah. I don't. They've got 5 starting pitchers. None of them named Justin Verlander. I don't know what I don't know what Houston's going to do with Verlander. The pitching in Houston, the return of Kyle Tucker. Kyle Tucker had a monster week this past week. Yep. So I definitely see your point with Seattle, and if I'm any of the other teams, I don't want to run up against the Mariners. If I'm the Orioles, I don't want anything to do with them. They're going to outpitch me. They're going to out-hit me. If I am one of the other wild cards, if I get matched up, this could be amazing. We could see if this works out to where Seattle gets the 6th wild card. They would face Houston in Houston. And this year, after this game, I believe it will be a 7-4 head-to-head in favor of the Mariners this year. That would be the 2 teams that I believe you don't want to face would have to go head-to-head in that first round. So I'm with you with Seattle's pitching. They have the pitching to go out there and win the World Series. And we are seeing it today as Miller and company shut down the Astro Bats. Houston has 4 hits in this game, and it's not going to get any easier because Seattle's throwing everyone they got. It's going to be Gilbert. It's going to be Kirby. You're getting everybody.
Yeah,
it's dangerous. They definitely could be. I want to see. I don't know. I know the changes took place. Part of me is still skeptical if they can do it because these are still guys in a lineup that can get hot, and I gotta see. I will be skeptic of this team and worried that at any moment they can go right back into that swinging and missing and striking out more than anybody else mode, and that'll kill them in the postseason when they're going up against the best pitching in baseball.
Yeah, I just think of a couple of things, right? When we talked with H-Town Wheelhouse, and he was telling us, the one thing he's been a little afraid of is the inconsistency with the Astros offense with runners in scoring position. I wonder if that could end up being something that comes up in the postseason. But then I also think about it with the Mariners' point of view. You go back to the Phillies a couple of years ago. I mean, the timing of it was a little different, right? The Phillies happened earlier on back in 2022 when they went with Thompson over Girardi. Well, look what happened with that Phillies team. I mean, they just got red hot after that, and they just clicked all the way to the World Series. I wonder, again, it's sort of like this weird thing. It's, and I think of the Rangers last year, the D-backs last year, where they kind of had to fight their way in the end, to get those playoff spots. They got in. They ended up getting to the World Series. You know, momentum's a thing. It's weird. You see like teams that go in cold doesn't seem to affect them, but I feel like those teams that go in just hot, and they figure stuff out, that tends to help a little bit. This Mariners team, I think, is dangerous, but I will say this: I said it earlier, they need to win out, in my opinion, because I was doing the math, I was crunching the numbers, and if they finish tied with the Royals, right? So that means they would have to. I think I had the Mariners going 5-1 for this week. I gave them a good week, but 85 and 77, and I had the Royals, whatever it was, 3-3 maybe for the rest of the week, finishing 85 and 77. Yeah. The interesting part about that, if that's how it plays out, they would finish with a tied head-to-head record, right? So then you'd have to go to the next tiebreaker, and that would be the in-division tiebreaker, where the Royals actually are a game ahead when it comes to their record in division. I believe they're 33 and 20 against Central opponents, and the Mariners are 32 and 21. So the Royals in that situation would
get the tiebreaker.
Get the tiebreaker, which that would be heartbreaking. Could you imagine that? Like the Mariners have played this well, and that's how it ends.
2 games back. 2 games back is so far right now. Like you said, they could go 5-1, and Kansas City could go 3-3, and still Kansas City's in. That 2 games is so it's a big gap. It's a big gap when you're in the week.
Who was a team? I'm going blank. It's almost my bedtime. Who was a team a while back where they won out? Was it 09 with the Twins? I can't remember. There was a team that just won out and they got the wild card. Can't fully remember. I can't remember. Bedtime for me. I don't know. Maybe people in the comments. I can't remember.
Yeah, but if somebody's got that for us, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'd have to go look. There have been a couple. I know that.
Yeah,
I think didn't the 2012 A's, didn't they have just like a red hot end of the year, and then they just got in? I can't remember, but either way,
it sounds familiar.
Yeah, I'd have to go back. But in my opinion, don't let the Mariners get in. I would not want to play that team. Now, with the Royals, I'll ask you this: with the Kansas City Royals, on a 1 to 10 panic meter with the Royals, are you panicking?
Well, they're still getting good pitching, and that is what has carried them all year. And if they're going to make it into the postseason, that is what is going to have to carry them. So they've got games in Washington. They start tomorrow in Washington. That's a great setup. And they're going to throw Raggins and Waka, and it's still to be determined on who pitches the sandwich, the middle game there. I like that, right? And if we're talking about Kansas City needs to win at least 3 games, they should be able to get 2 in DC, especially if you have Raggins and Walker taking.
As long as those guys aren't going out and playing some blackjack, hopefully they don't stay hot at the table.
Stay away from CJ Abrams. You are not.
When you're hot, man, you can't leave the table.
No, you can't leave. It's like a time warp. It's like a time warp. You walk out of there expecting it to be 2 a.m. and oh my God, it's 8 a.m. What are you gonna do?
I've never had that before. I don't think I've ever been dubbed as a good blackjack player. I used to play it back in the early 2000s online, where you had the online chat rooms and you could play blackjack with people. Yeah. That's the only experience I got, so I wouldn't know. He must have had a hot game. I mean,
it happens. It has happened where you just lose track of time. But he's got a different set of responsibilities. So, they've got the 3 games in DC, and then they have the 3 games in Atlanta. And in Atlanta, if they can get 2 in DC, all they got to do is get 1 in Atlanta. And that they're going to throw Singer, Lugo, and Raggins again. I got to think they can get 1 of those, right? So the pitching that has carried them this far is now going to have to be, because they have stopped scoring runs. They scored the fewest runs in baseball last week. That is what is going to have to carry them the rest of the way. It's going to have to pick up those 9 guys that are carrying a bunch of sticks and say, let's go, everybody on board. We're carrying you across the finish line, because otherwise they're not going to make it. If the pitching falters this week, they're screwed because the bats are a mess. Did you realize that Paul DeJong, the big bat, I say that chuckling under my breath, the big bat that they acquired at the deadline has lost his regular spot to Adam Frazier? That blows my mind. We're looking at Paul DeJong. He's in a slump. I don't care if he's in a slump. If there's a chance that he could hit a home run, even if he's striking out 3 or 4 times, he's got a better shot of doing something than Adam Frazier does, because Adam Frazier is also stinking up the joint. But Paul DeJong could get a hold of one. I can't believe that they pulled and are giving Paul DeJong's at-bats to Adam Frazier, because look, at the deadline, they did not go big. There was it was an opportunity for them to, but they decided to go and sort of invest their prospects in pitching, and they went on the cheap when it came to the bats. They got lucky. Tommy Pham fell to them a month later. Tommy Pham hasn't been doing much lately. And DeJong has lost his spot. There's nobody hitting other than Bobby Witt. Bobby Witt is the only guy right now, and Yuli Gurriel, who's there, is collecting some hits right now, but that's it, and that's a problem. So, from a perspective of panic, I still believe in this pitching, and the fact that they have the 2-game lead over Seattle, and they have the 1-game lead over Minnesota, and Minnesota's schedule this week is a tougher road to go. They've got Miami, which, okay, that sounds easy, but again, they're a game back, remember, and then they've got Baltimore. So this Minnesota team that is struggling could have used Miami and the White Sox this week, but that's not how it's going to play out. I believe it's the Tigers who are playing the White Sox this week. So I think as long as Kansas City's pitching shows up, give me 3 wins. Because again, if you can give me 3, that should keep you ahead of Seattle, and I also think that should keep you ahead of Minnesota, because I don't see Minnesota winning 4 games this week.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about the Royals. I'm a little worried just because their lineup has not been. It hasn't been there since Pascal went down.
That's bad.
Since he's out, I mean, I don't. That's kind of one of those things, right? Because you have so many players in baseball. When this happens. Football, you lose your quarterback, there's a very good chance you're pretty much done, right? I remember Brady with Matt Castle when he went down with that, when he tore his ACL years back, and I was like, oh, okay, well, Patriots are finished, right? Basketball, right? When one of your guys, your starters go down, that's a huge hit to your team. I don't, unless you got someone that can really step in baseball, it doesn't necessarily seem to be as crucial a lot, because you usually have some other guys that can step in. But when he went down, I feel like there was not really anyone that could just step right in. And
no, there wasn't.
Yeah.
No, they're bad. They're bad. They had nobody step in. But here's the thing: the strength of the team is still intact. Like that's the element here. The quarterback of this team, Bobby Witt Jr., the offensive line. But protecting Bobby Witt is the starting rotation, and they're all fine, right? Yeah. They're healthy. You're going to see Raggins. You're going to see Waka. You're going to see Lugo. You're going to see Singer. That is the only, if they were dealing with pitching injuries, I would say, yes, I'm worried. I think Kansas City's in a bad spot, but having the starters there, I think gets them through. Now, I don't think they're going to get past the first round, but they get into the postseason. They get into the dance.
I will say, the Royals, to me, I feel like if they get into this postseason, they're that weird team that I feel like no one is going to pick. And I feel like they could just be that very oddball team, and that you all of a sudden just see them like the Diamondbacks last year in the championship series. You know what I mean? They got those guys, right? You got Lugo, you got Reagan's there. You got
but Arizona had bats. Arizona had bats.
I'd say Arizona had the deeper lineup.
Wit and nothing.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know what I mean? But like, again, sort of like that, they're just weird. Like I feel like if they click, maybe something could happen and get some magic going. But I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. Now,
all the magic is in Queens right now. There's no more magic to be had. It's all in Queens.
We'll talk about them in just 1 minute, but one final question. Gun to your head, who are your three? Well, I think we can agree. Let's say the Orioles are going to be that first wild card.
Yeah.
I think we could also probably say it looks like the Tigers are going to be that second wild card. Who do you think is going to be that third wild card? We haven't even talked about the Twins. That's another thing. They've had so many injuries. That was another thing. Hot and cold team this year. I thought maybe they had it figured out. And then they just got ice cold again. I don't know. Who do you got third wild card?
Kansas City.
Yeah.
Kansas City. It comes down to the pitching. It comes down to the pitching. I don't believe in Minnesota. So we're talking about how Kansas City's bats are just cooked right now. Minnesota's going through the same thing. Minnesota is going through the same thing. When it comes to runs scored, they did score some runs. They scored more runs than Kansas City did, significantly. I think double the number of runs last week. But when it comes to team OPS and guys producing, nothing. They lost that Cleveland series. They dropped 3 games. They were all 1-run games. So you got to find where were the runs? We just needed 1 or 2 and we could have won. The guy who led the team in hits was not driven in at all over the last week. Matt Wallner had 9 hits plus 2 walks. So he was on base 11 times over the last week. He didn't score a single run. Nobody drove him in. So I believe the Minnesota Twins, even though they get to face Miami, that's great. I think they get one of those games. I think they will only get one of them, and then they'll face Baltimore. Let's say they get 2 of them. 3 wins is not going to be enough for Minnesota to get in. So I think that the Minnesota Twins are probably looking at a 3-3 week, and that should be enough to keep Kansas City in, because, again, you get Cole Ragans out there twice. You get Lugo, you get Waka, you get Singer. Again, because the strength of the Royals is still intact, I think it's Kansas City.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning. I would say this. If the season was 1 more week, I'd go Mariners.
I agree.
If it was one
I
more
agree.
week.
I agree.
That's the thing. It's just too little too late, and Seattle fans, they're going to be it's going to be another terrible offseason, right?
Yeah.
Where you're just like,
this is why, I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is why May and June matter.
Yeah.
And when we're on here and we're doing power rankings and we're talking about how it's unacceptable to drop 2 or 3 to the Rockies and all that stuff, this is why. Because you get to the end and you wish you had more games. You wish you had another week, or now you're looking back and you're like, oh man, that June was so bad it cost us the season. But in June, everybody's like, dude, relax, chill. It's only June. I don't want to hear it anymore. In my live streams, when I'm talking about teams that are screwed, the Chicago Cubs, May and June cost them their season. They were 13 games below 500 in May and June. And at this point, where are we at? They're 4 or 5 games above 500. So if you could have at least gone, if you were the Cubs, if you could have at least been a 500 team in May and June, you'd be in the mix for the wild card right now. But they stunk it up for those 2 months, and it cost them their season. So similar to Seattle, I don't want to hear people when we're halfway through the season criticizing teams for losing games and losing series, saying, "Dude, relax, it's early. There's still 3 more months of the season to play." I don't want to hear it anymore, because it's going to cost Seattle. It has cost the Cubs, And and we can go back and look. I'm sure there's 5 or 6 more teams that it has cost.
Yeah. Those games are important, right?
Yes,
Game
they are.
1 of the season. It's important. I will say this. I'll make a bold take. If the Mariners, if they could sweep this series against the Astros, I got them. I got them in. I think they'll get in. I think they'll sweep Oakland, and I think I think they're in. If they sweep Houston, that's a tough task. But hey, they got one.
Step one.
They got one, and you got Gilbert, and Kirby going games 2 and 3. You got a chance. I'll say that if they sweep, they're in. But a team that needs to win out are the Atlanta Braves, in my opinion. My goodness, it has been. What a wacky season for the Mets, right? I mean, coming into the year, I still remember people on Twitter. I don't know if you remember this, but I remember when JD Martinez signed with the Mets. I remember. I don't remember the exact quote. I'm paraphrasing, but he said he wanted to sign, with a playoff postseason contender. And I remember people were like, "Oh, so why'd you go to the Mets?" And I still remember that. It's like, it's so crazy. It's always so funny when you see so many people gathering around to, joke on something or hate on something. It always, like, so many times, more often than not, I feel like it tends to really bite people in the butt. And the Mets right now, man, no one's saying anything about that JD Martinez quote, from the beginning of the year. But here they are. They've had a wacky season. You had Grimace come to town. You had Jose Iglesias with a concert. I mean, the one podcast, the hot tall girl came in. They got a purple seat. It's been, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know how the people that are doing the ratings, how they scripted all this, but here it is. And they are, I can't believe it. I mean, I did a freaking video saying it's time for a fire sale. I mean, and they did it. I got to learn that lesson too. I got to stop making those dumb videos. I got to not jump off the bridge so quick. But man, it's kind of the same situation here. Could it be too little too late for the Braves at this point? It's and complete opposite for the Braves. Miserable year. They have somehow kept their way in this thing. There's so many injuries though. And at this point, the confidence rating for me with the Braves, it's not high. I still think there's a chance they could figure this out because they got some dogs pitching here in the next few days. You got Sale. I actually do like the Braves in this series against the Mets. I actually do have them taking 2 out of 3. But
which would be huge.
It would be huge, but the problem is it might not even be enough.
Well, you would take the tiebreaker situation away. You would grab that. They're 5-5 against each other. So whoever wins this series is set up nicely. If there's any, I mean, look, if the Mets take 2 out of 3, it's game, set, match. Mets are in, Braves are, I guess we can't say Braves are out because the Diamondbacks have, back-ended themselves into this whole situation.
But the problem is that the Royals are playing the Braves and they're trying to fight for their playoff lives here too. So it's not like they're going to Chicago and going to go for an easy sweep. I mean, the Braves, they got a tough few games here to wrap up their year. And the Mets, and then the Mets, who do they got the last series? I'm going completely blank.
Brewers.
Oh, right. But with the Brewers, who knows how they're going to manage when, resting guys.
Yeah, that's Sunday. That's Sunday. You're not going to see any significant pitching. It'll be guys that won't make the October roster. Yeah, totally. So that last game, if the Mets need it, that should be an easy one to go out and grab. So the Braves, that makes the necessity for Atlanta to sweep the Mets that much more important. Yeah. Because if you can do that, you can get ahead of them. Because we're 2 games, right? We're 2 games apart. If you take all 3, you jump ahead. If you at least get 2, you'll still be behind a game, but you will have the tiebreaker. So if it goes the way where you take 2 out of 3 from Kansas City and the Mets only get 1 of 3 against the Brewers, you got in. You got the tiebreaker. But Arizona has a very interesting road. As we're recording this, the Giants are up 5-2. And if the Diamondbacks lose this game, then the Diamondbacks will only be, I think it'll be a game and a half up on the Braves. There's a world where both the Mets and the Braves make the postseason, and that world starts with the Diamondbacks losing today. If the Diamondbacks follow through and lose to the Giants and ultimately drop this series, and then the Diamondbacks have to face the Padres, and the Padres could be set up in a situation where they're looking at grabbing every single game because maybe they put themselves in position to win the NL West. Because let's say they take 2 out of 3 from the Dodgers, which is a very real possibility because the Padres have the season series head-to-head against the Dodgers. It's like 7-3 or something like that. It's significant.
Yeah.
So the Padres could take 2 out of 3, which means they could be at a situation where they're 1 game or 2 games behind the Dodgers and trying to take advantage of any games that the Rockies win. The Diamondbacks have worked themselves into a very unfortunate position. They're currently, again, down by 3, and there's 2 on in the top of the 5th. The Giants could be adding more here. But your point about the Braves, they need to enter this whole situation with the mindset of we need to just win every single game because if we do that, we're in. But winning 6 games against the Mets and the Royals is a lot to ask.
It is. And you bring up a good point with the Diamondbacks too. I think we've kind of programmed ourselves a little bit, at least myself, to where the Diamondbacks are so good there for just after the All-Star break, they got red hot there. And, but then it's like, oh, you know what? Yeah, they've been dropping a couple games here as of late. They're not going into the postseason as hot as we thought they were. This could be really interesting. And I was saying that too, where I was going over the Diamondbacks last night. I was like, oh man, they got the Padres to wrap things up here. Like this is not, and like you said, the Padres, they're just so hot. I could talk about them. That's a different discussion. But it's funny how you might not even be, you could have the best team, but right now the schedules matter so much. And even winning 2 out of 3, like the Braves, if they win 2 out of 3 here against the Mets and the Royals, that still might not be enough to get in. That's it's mind boggling. Now, when it comes down to it, who do you think? Let's say the Padres, that could be a separate discussion here, whether or not we think they could win that division. I do think the Dodgers are going to hang on and win that division. I think the Padres are making it fun, but I think in the end, they'll be that first wild card. I'm not sure if you disagree or not, but right now, where are you thinking here with that second and third wild card?
Well, I made my predictions the other day, and I had the Diamondbacks and the Mets in and the Braves out. Yeah. So I'll stick with that for now because it is an uphill battle for the Atlanta Braves. I can't definitively say that there's no chance. I made a prediction. I'm going to stick with the prediction. But the Atlanta Braves, look, the bats were there last week. They hit the most home runs in all of baseball, and that was one of their strong facets. There's strong elements to their game last year was the long ball, and they have not been as successful slugging this year as they did last year. So, but if this is what we're going to see, if we're going to unlock that Matt Olson that we all expected, if we're going to get Michael Harris hitting bombs, if we're going to get Soler hitting home runs, all of a sudden this team's going to start hitting the ball, slugging. Then this becomes that Braves team, even though it doesn't have Acuna out there. Albies is back. You've got a shot. They definitely have a shot, but it's the pitching. The pitching matchup is going to be interesting. They're going to against the Mets. They're going to throw everything they've got at them. Now, unfortunately, we still don't have Ronaldo Lopez back. This is where Braves fans really would like to have him, but you're going to have Schwellenbach, who has been capable. And Braves fans would probably argue he's been better than capable. He's been reliable. And you're going to throw him out there tomorrow. followed by Sale, followed by Max Fried. And that's, I mean, if you're from a pitching element and you're the Braves and you want to throw the best you got, that's pretty damn good. Max Fried has kept those Mets bats down for the majority of his career. So that's a great matchup, that final game for the Mets with Fried. Sale, we'll see what he does. I know he's having a fantastic season, but there are some head-to-heads against Mets hitters that are not great. So I don't know. I think that I love that we're getting a Mets and a Braves matchup. I think the Braves can take 2 out of 3, and the Mets can still make it in. So I will stick with my prediction though. I've got money on the Diamondbacks getting in, so I have a little bit of a personal rooting interest here in Arizona making it. But I don't know. They're losing right now 5-2 to the Giants. I'm not happy about that. It's not even a Blake Snell game. Hayden Birdsong's on the mound. Come on. Score some runs.
I know.
I'll go Diamondbacks and Mets with the Braves missing out. It's just, again, like I said for Seattle, 2 games back is a lot right now, and that's what the Braves are.
I will say this. What I find interesting about this last week is you have both wild card races possibly they're connected with each other, right? Because you got the Braves and the Royals for that final slate. What if we have a situation where
I mean, it's like a reverse World Series.
Yeah, it's like
the winner of that series gets into the playoffs.
Right. I mean, you could have a situation where the Royals, they need to win to keep the Mariners out. And you know, same thing with the Braves. Like, you know, they're trying to get in and, you know, whatever, you know, it's I find that interesting.
That could be great. Oh man.
That could be fun. That's good. That's good drama.
That would be fantastic.
I'm still having a hard time. Like, I'm still even having a hard time connecting that in my head. That sounds just bonkers. But I think the Braves, realistically, listen, I'm sorry to do this, Mets fans. I'm sorry. Okay. But listen, we have seen time and time again. I hate to do it.
Don't do it.
Listen, is LOL Mets are they going to make one final appearance?
It's been replaced with OMG. It has been replaced.
Listen, I know, but listen, LOL Mets never seems to die. Could this happen again, where once again it shows up? Like it always happens when the Mets fans are on a high. Always. I mean,
I think it's just
saying, if you want another LOL Mets moment, this is it. And the Braves, they can absolutely. I'm sorry. I mean, I know someone's going to come back in the comments next week and yell at me about this, but I think Schwellenbach and Severino, I think that's a pretty even matchup. I do like that matchup overall. I could see that going either way. But I'm going Sale over Peterson. Sale dominated the Mets when he faced them this year. Fried, it was a while, I think, he pitched against the Mets, but he looked great against them. And also pointing this out too, the Braves, despite their problems offensively this year, I talked about this last night, they hit left-handed pitching pretty well. You know, I don't know. I think the Braves, they could very well sweep this. They got a good matchup of pitching going here. They're going to have to find a way to get it done against Severino. That's a tall task. He's had a good year.
They could.
We'll see.
But you know what? You're forgetting something very important here.
That's not a surprise with me.
You're forgetting that the Mets are the team of destiny in 2024. So somehow, some way, they're even if they get swept, they're still going to get in. When you think about the Mets season and the low point when you did your fire sale video, it was justified. It was warranted. The thing was falling apart. Didn't they lose like their first 6 or 7 games of the year? And Rose is on the on the TV broadcast talking about how it's rock bottom. We've had the play-by-play guy of the New York Mets use the words rock bottom in a broadcast at a certain point in this season. So they have gone as low as you can go. They have not had Kodai Senga for more than 5 innings this year. He came back, he got hurt, he tried to come back again, he got hurt again. This is going to be good for the Mets down the road because Senga's not going to reach his innings to be able to opt out after next year. but you've not had your best pitcher this year. You have Coda, you have I'm still stuck on Senga. You have Manaea and you have Severino pitching like we haven't seen in the last 5 years. You've got David Peterson having a career year. You're getting good stuff from McGill. Diaz throws 2 innings to shut down the Phillies last night. Diaz is lights out. Brett Beatty, it's official. Brett Beatty is garbage. Let's just put Mark Vientos in. Boom, that's fine.
Yeah.
You've had so many things. Jose Iglesias comes up, and he's going to be the comeback player of the year. You have Lindor go down. You take 3 out of 4 from the Phillies without Francisco Lindor. You bring up Luis Angel Acuna, who wasn't playing that well at AAA, but Luis Angel Acuna has just morphed into Francisco Lindor. So there is, I'm fired up about this because it's a team of destiny thing. Everything that's supposed to be going wrong, that's supposed to be going LOL Mets, isn't. It feels like something's different, and maybe it's just a different cast of characters with Manaea and Severino. They're new. They're bringing a different presence. You have Acuna. You have Vientos. You've got JD Martinez. Maybe all these new faces are blending in some enough ingredients to move on from the whole LOL thing, because there's just too much happening to count the Mets out. And I did it long enough. I did it all the way up until July. And from about mid-August on, I just came to the realization that I was wrong. I was stupid. This New York Mets team is the team of destiny, and I just need to get on board. It's been remarkable.
But listen, I'm just gonna say this. I got 2 things. Okay. I want the Mets to do this. I'm just pointing this out. Mets fans, don't you come yelling at me. I would love for the Mets to get this done. 2 things though.
Yep.
Did today, the off day, could that end up being where they get iced? Just pointing that out. Right. The last time they had a day off, they lost their series against the Phillies. I'm just saying.
Right.
We'll see. But well, that's different. That's not a sweep, but still. And listen, we're not through the season yet. I get it. I'm hearing you. Jump on the bandwagon. Let's go. I'm buying in.
Right.
Listen, LOL Mets is not dead until the season is over. You never know. It could pop back up just like Grimace walks into that stadium. You never know. Listen, I am I need to see them finish it. I need to see it finished.
Even the Grimace thing should have been the biggest joke. That should have been the biggest LOL thing.
That's
because we have Grimace throwing out the first pitch. This is a joke. Oh, nope. We're going to rip off a winning streak and we're going to turn our season around this moment. It really is. It's just, it's remarkable. The opportunities to LOL have flipped around and they have become the OMGs, and it just feels different. And I'm in it. I'm all about the whole, I think I'm the only one calling them that, and I'm going to keep banging that drum because I want more people to call them that, because they're not supposed to be here. This New York Mets team is not supposed to be pushing. They're going to win 90 games. This team's not supposed to win 90 games. They're supposed to win 80 games and flirt with the wild card spot. And the talent on the roster indicated that. The moves by the front office this past offseason indicated that. And what has happened? No Kodai Senga. Brett Beatty's a bust. Starling Marte is a negative run value bat in that lineup. It doesn't matter. They're going to win 90 games against the odds. Team of destiny.
I hope so. But I will say, the Mets, they've done a great job up to this point. Mm-hmm. Severino has been so good this year. I'm so glad he had himself a bounce back year. That was a guy I expected to do a lot better with the Mets, going over to the David Stearns led Mets. I expected them to kind of work with him this year, and he's really stepped up in a big way. Mm-hmm. And hey, you say the same thing about Manaea. Manaea has been fantastic this year too. He's had some bumps over the last couple of years.
It's the best. Both of them, Manaea and Severino, it's the best they have looked since 2018 or 2019. They're both, Manaea and Severino, going to start, or I think already have started 30 games. Did you have that on your Mets bingo card? Minaya and Severino will both start 30 games this year. You'd say, hell no. This bingo card's a bust. That's not going to happen. But it did.
Yeah. Crazy. And then even Odd Villain here in the chat, he says Quintana too. Yeah, Quintana. I was just talking about him last night. He's been great too.
Yes,
I mean, they've had so much starting pitching stepping up. The bats have gotten hot. You know, this Mets team, they absolutely deserve to be in this spot. It's been a wild season for them. It's been a wackadoodle, but here they are. They're playing great. And listen, and for anyone that thinks I'm, hating on the Mets, I literally said this coming into the year. I said, I think they will be in the wild card picture at the end of the year. I saw this team being good. Right? I didn't know how good they were going to be, but I saw them being competitive, and here they are. We'll see. I hope they get the job done. I don't want LOL Mets to come back. I'm over that whole thing. I just needed to end. But listen, got a few games left. They got to finish the job. And listen, say we will about how the Braves have struggled this year, but like I just said, season's not over. It's not done yet.
Oh, it's going to be great.
Some good guys going on the mound here. They got Fried and Sale. Listen, I will say this. If they can pull out a win tomorrow, Mets fans, you better be worried a little bit because, sorry, you got Sale, Fried back to back. That's not going to be easy. I'm just saying. I do think in the end, I mean, who knows how this is going to play out, but I think it's kind of a similar situation in the American League, right? Too little, too late. The Braves have had a miserable year. When it comes to the injuries, I just think right now the Mets, like you're saying, kind of like that team of destiny thing, they seem to just be in just the right spot at the right time, and they did just enough to take advantage of all the injuries the Braves have had. This Braves team, a lot of people were picking them to go to the World Series this year, and
well, they should be. And there's nothing wrong with that. The picking the Braves to be in the World Series is exactly it's what you should do. I think when we were together at the Bet US house in spring training, you were favoring the Braves over the Dodgers. Everyone was saying the Dodgers. No, wait a minute, don't forget about the Braves. But you can't. Injuries can completely decimate a season, and when you lose Strider, when you lose Acuna, when you lose Albies for the amount of time that they lost Ozzy Albies, they're now dealing with the Ronaldo Lopez injury. They have just been crushed with it. And because you're going to get the poor performance, you're going to get the regressions. Austin Riley's down right now too. You're going to get the performance that goes up and down. You're going to have a year where, oh my God, Matt Olson's not going to hit 50 home runs this year. He's only going to hit 30. Well, okay, we have other things to fall back on. But when guys are going down, those things that you can fall back on aren't there to make up for the regression that you see when Austin Riley's not going to get to his power numbers. Olson's not going to get to his power numbers. To counter it, Azuna's had an amazing year. Chris Sale's had an amazing year. If not for those two, where would the Braves be? But if they had their team, I think the Braves would be comfortably in, and it would be the Diamondbacks and the Mets going head to head for the final wild card spot. I think the Braves would be comfortable. I think they would be 90 wins if you had their two best players, but they don't have them, so they're fighting.
But hey, give a lot of credit to and that's not taking anything away from the Mets. They've earned this spot, right? They've 100%. Played their way into this spot. Sure, the Braves have had their injuries, but hey, you know what? At the end of the day, I always say this too. A lot on streams, right? It's not just about the major league team; it's about the organization, right? And in the end, the Mets, their organization's been a little deeper. And this year, right, when you take a look at the Braves, they've had guys come up from the minors. They've contributed a bit. We've seen guys like Schwellenbach really step up this year, but you've had a lot of guys with the Mets this year, these younger guys step up for them, like you mentioned with Vientos, even Acuna, stepping up in a big way over the last couple of weeks. They've had little contributions here and there, and give a lot of credit to David Stearns for putting these pieces in place for the Mets. Hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles a lot. When you got a 162 game schedule, anything can happen. But I think in the end, the Mets will find a way. to get this done. I think it's going to be too little too late for the Braves, and they're going to have an offseason full of question marks. I think it's going to be interesting. But, hey, the reason I kind of – and I want to say this too because I saw a couple of people in the chat saying that they didn't like my takes, blah, 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 blah. Even though I love the numbers, I love taking a look at the stats, I love looking at analytics and whatnot, there is just something about the game of baseball where it's just ridiculous. And, you can look at numbers and stuff all you want, but there's always just, you got to leave room open for where something crazy could happen. And maybe we end up getting one of these crazy weeks. I mean, go back to 2011, right? Game 162. I mean, the most, I will always remember that night. I remember sitting there in my living room, paying attention to everything unfold that whole month. It was just insane, right? Could we end up having another drama-filled week to finish this year?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we can look at the numbers. We can look at the matchups, but I'm always leaving room open. When you got races this close, you can say bad takes and whatnot all you want, but you have to leave room open for the unthinkable to happen, right? We did have a super chat coming in from Joe Hill. Joe Hill earlier in the stream. Thank you for that, Joe. Hinch has been masterful for the Tigers. Manager of the year. I'd probably lean no. Probably just, even though, yes, they've completely turned it on in the second half. I feel like, I could see the argument for it. I'm just thinking about how the voters.
Cleveland. I think Cleveland.
I think it's probably going to end up being vote. I think it's going to be I think Cleveland went through a few bumps there. I would, they went through a bit of a slump, but they've gotten themselves back on track here. Yeah. I think it will be vote. First year as a manager, they got into the postseason. Voting, you can look at numbers and whatnot, but you got to remember how people are going to vote. No pun intended.
Here's an interesting one. The National League Manager of the Year is going to be far more interesting. Yeah. I think there's actually going to be a battle there between the Padres and Schilt and the Mets and Mendoza, right? Like the Padres 90 wins, top wild card spot, pushing the Dodgers, that whole thing. And the Brewers too. Wow,
that's my pick. I'm gonna go.
It's a good point. Yeah, you got Murphy, you've got Schilt, and you've got Mendoza. That is not fair. That is an unfair National League Manager of the Year situation.
That's tough. Schilt too. I mean, I don't want Padres fans getting grumpy at me, but yeah, he absolutely deserves it too.
All three of them, though. Can they divide it up over three ways? Because they should. You know what they should do? Do away with the Manager of the Year for the National League this year and do the most overrated Manager of the Year, and that would be Craig Counsell, ladies and gentlemen. That would be the most overrated Manager of the Year in the National League. Craig Counsell. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, that is, I think that is going to come into play here. You got to think, man, this guy got the biggest contract for a manager of all time, and you got like people are like Pat Murphy. I mean, what is happening here? And they traded away Corbin Burns. That's another storyline too. I definitely see the argument for Murphy. I definitely see the argument for Schilt. I think you could see Schilt because I think you could also go back to even the offseason or spring training when they said, he's going to be moving Bogarts to second. All right. I think you could see people bringing that up.
Sure.
Because he came in and he said, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going he kind of just led the team right from the get-go. I
think you're right that it's Murphy, just because of the three teams, the Mets, the Cubs, or the Mets, the Brewers, and the Padres, which team in the eyes of the baseball community has overachieved the most?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people would lean to say the Milwaukee Brewers have. And they're also going to win the division. So you're going to get an NL Central crown. You're going to have overachieved more than the Padres had. You're going to have overachieved more than the Mets have. So it probably ends up being Murphy. thinking about it.
Yeah, and I think out of all of them, he's had the complete year, right, from start to finish. I feel like the Brewers haven't even. I can't remember how close it even got in that division. Maybe a couple of games. I can't remember. It was early, but I feel like the Brewers have pretty much just dominated that Central all year. And a first-year manager taking over for Council, no Corbin Burns.
Right.
I feel like that's going to end up being the pick. And I'd say for the American League, I'd probably go Vogt. I think.
Yeah, I think that's who it's got to be. It's much clearer in the American League.
And I think with Hinch too, I think because Hinch, and people are going to bring it up, the whole sign stealing thing. I'm not saying I think that's a silly reason to, bring up at this point, but people are going to bring it up. They're going to say, "Oh, he has that before. There's no way he's going to get it." I don't think, and again, I'm not saying that's a reason why you should not consider him. I just know people are going to bring it up. So I'll go Vogt in the American League. I'll go Murphy in the National League.
I feel like it's Vogt. To anybody that thinks I hate Cleveland, suck on that. I'm totally kidding. I've been getting it from Cleveland fans because they have not been high enough in the top 10 in my power rankings. And I agree. They have not been high enough, but also teams, there are just certain teams that are just still ahead of them. They haven't moved up yet. Anyway,
I mean, I've been getting it from Dodger fans for the last few weeks. I mean, my goodness.
Comes and goes. Fan bases, it comes and goes.
Don't say anything against Ohtani. If you do, here they come. I don't even know. I haven't even said anything against Ohtani. All I said a few weeks ago was I think Lindor maybe should get a little credit here. He's been very good, all around player. Been great.
Oh
defense.
No! So what are you saying? Lindor should be the MVP over Ohtani?
Oh, absolutely not now. It's definitely done now. I was saying, a month ago, I think Lindor should be in this conversation. I even said it. Ohtani will win the MVP, but I think Lindor should get some credit. I've seen people say, "Oh, because Lindor he grounds he fields 4 grounders a game. He should get consideration." And people are using that to make fun of the argument. It's like, well, how about you go out there and go field 4 ground balls in a game? Let's see you do it. You make it sound so easy. Anyway, but
if Ohtani, this all could have been cleared up and everything would have been fine, and Lindor would have been the MVP in the National League if Shohei Ohtani had been on that damn plane and signed with the Toronto Blue Jays. That's what you needed to have happen. You needed him to go to Toronto. He didn't. Therefore, congratulations and enjoy it. Every National League fan, I had to deal with this as a Blue Jay fan for years, where Vladimir Guerrero Jr. 2021 had a year that nobody his age in the history of baseball had ever had, but Ohtani was there. And Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was not the MVP. This is going to happen every year for the next 10 years. Have fun.
The real question is, who is going to be on the plane this offseason? Is there going to be a plane?
It's gonna be what the Via Rail or the Acela. What is it gonna be? He's gonna be on a train to Toronto, and the train will pull into the station there, and there won't be any Juan Soto. It'll be Juan Soto. That's what it's gonna be.
I'm sorry to do this. People are gonna think I'm ragging on the Mets, but it would be pretty funny that you hear what Steve Cohen's plane has just left where Juan Soto was eating. Wait a minute. What is happening? So people are going to be, we're going to be tracking that plane. That's going to be fun.
I'll be tracking the plane. I track every damn plane. If my team is involved or not, I will track the planes. I'll get flight tracker back up. We will be here for a flight.
I went back to that stream, the one that I was doing. And because I needed to relive when I saw the Bob Nightingale tweet. Yep. It's still one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my entire life.
I have a side story that I cannot say on the live stream that I remind me to tell you when we get off. I can't say it on live. I need to tell you something about that and him and then the whole thing. It's kind of I'll just say I should have seen it coming. I'll just put it that way. I should have seen it coming.
We should have all seen it coming. And then when we saw Ohtani with his dog, that was my God. My goodness. Well, anyway, everyone, we're going to wrap this up. Everyone, if you can, head on over to wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Google, Stitcher, wherever it may be. Go download our podcast, subscribe to it, whatever the whole sequence you got to do. Make sure you got notifications turned on for whenever we drop an episode. We got the postseason coming up. We will be doing some podcast episodes over the next month or so. And then right after that, we'll be diving into the off season. It never stops here on both of our channels. Jim, any last words before we wrap this up?
This is going to be a great week, and it is going to be an amazing October, and I hope you're ready for it. It is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really excited for it. So I can't wait to experience it and talk about it with everybody.
Me as well. But everyone, thank you for stopping by tonight. We, a bit of a last minute stream here today, but hey, we did it. Thank you for coming out. And everyone, go have yourself a good rest of your night. We both will be probably doing content. Jim, content this week?
Yeah.
What do you got?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think there might be some pop-up live streams around Mets and Braves and Dodgers and Padres. The live streams are going to go. Live streams is going to get heavy. Live streams here.
Yeah,
very soon.
Yeah. That's the I think for postseason time, that's the way to go. So me as well. We'll be both busy. So everyone, have yourself a great rest of your night. We'll talk to you next time.
See you.